I extend a warm and hearty welcome to everybody on the call. I hope everybody's safe at home during the probable second wave of COVID. It's been a while since we came on this platform with our Emkay Mavens series. So very special series for us. Here we get the best in India, who have given a certain kind of definition to wealth management and asset management as we know it. And this session is no different. We have a very special guest with us. So before that, let me just introduce myself to you all. I am Sankalpo and I take care of business development and at PMS AIF World. We are India's leading digital alternates focused, asset management, wealth management platform. And we have the belief of informed investing, and you will find out certainly about it in this session and in our upcoming sessions. So without much ado, I will introduce our first guest for the evening, Mr. Rajesh Saluja. So Mr. Rajesh Saluja is an industry veteran. He has over 25 years of experience in the space of wealth management. He has a lot of feathers to his cap. He was responsible for setting up ASK's wealth advisory and multi-family office in 2006, and then throughout the global financial crisis and the years ensuing to now has helped the business and company grow immensely. Prior to that, he was with Standard Chartered, heading their heading their priority banking business and wealth management. And he is an honorary, chartered wealth manager from the US. And he brings in a lot of experience. He is a diverse kind of a person with a thought and with the ideas on various topics of wealth management. And I think will be immensely, we'll end up immensely more knowledgeable from this session with him. My second guest for the evening is a dear friend, Vikaas M. Sachdeva of Emkay Investment Advisors. So Vikaas is another industry champion, close to 2 decades of experience associated with great asset managers like Edelweiss, Inam, Birla Sun Life. He was there with Edelweiss when the merger with JP Morgan Mutual Fund took place, and it's been a success story from there on. He's also on the SEBI's Mutual Fund Advisory Committee. He was also associated with AMFI on their ETF committee, and he presented one of the first white papers for ETFs in India. So that's a lot of pedigree we have on the show today. And my third guest today evening is Sachin Shah. He's the fund manager, portfolio manager at Emkay Investment Advisors, and he is someone who is very keen. He was a very diligent framework and a very diligent eye while evaluating businesses, and that has helped him create his proprietary framework called Equal, which we might get to know a little bit about on today's show. And he has been managing funds for close to 15 years now, and he's been involved with a lot of marquee names like Motilal Oswal and now MK. And before we move ahead, I would also like to thank our sponsors and partners, FinLearn Academy, who are going to award today's best audience questions with the course, with a free complimentary course with them. So FinLearn is a holistic institute for learning the capital markets, trading the capital markets, and if you visit their website, you will come to know the good work that they do. And I'll be very excited if I won the prize today for asking the best questions. So that is about FinLearn. So now I will hand over the floor to Vikaas. Please take it ahead from here. Thank you.
Thank you, Sankalpo. That was a wonderful introduction. As we talk about Rajesh Saluja, at a personal level, I spoke to a few people. I spoke to a few of his colleagues, and I said, okay, can you give me the personal side of Rajesh Saluja? So these are some of the amazing points which came through. He's a very avid golfer. He travels across the world to participate in golf tournaments. But what is equally good is that he is a very passionate cricketer. And Rajesh, you and I are going to play a game of cricket one of these days. I believe you bowl very well. There are some news clippings I found about you because of your excellent bowling performance. You're super energetic. You keep traveling all over. You do a lot of coaching and mentoring, is what I believe, and this a lot of your colleagues have spoken very highly about. And I think it is testament to the fact that most of your original team is still with you. In fact, talking about the team, what the industry actually acknowledges is the fact that you were one of the first people to build a team right in the middle of the global crisis in 2007-8. Not only did it take a lot of perseverance, guts, but it is also a lot of vision on your part to start building a team there. A few other things which are industry acknowledgements. Your firm under you has been a pioneer in charging fees to clients. This is almost 12, 13 years ago. It's only now that we are talking about this becoming the norm, but you've been doing this all along. Also the fact, and in context of today's discussion, you're among the first few in the business who consciously recognize trust planning and legacy planning and got a few trust managers on board. I must also tell the audience that when I met Rajesh a few weeks ago and I broached this topic to him, he was immediately agreeable to come on the show, and that has been very nice of him to do that. Thank you so much, Rajesh. Welcome aboard. And I think, if it's okay with you, we'll just start off with the first few questions just to get the flow going.
Yeah, thank you, Sankalp and Vikaas, for the introduction and for having me on this show.
So before we begin, Vikaas, just a bit, I always do these polls. So the first poll that I did was, I have a legacy planning in place. Any guesses what % of people said yes, Rajesh?
Less than 5% or 0?
Oh, no. Then we have a very matured audience. 30% said yes. 20% said no. So, but that's still quite a task at hand. So, we are keen to hear from you. Please
Sure.
Go ahead.
Wonderful.
It's a good surprise to see that 30% people have that.
Yeah. So my first question to you, Rajesh, is, how do you define the art and science of managing wealth? Is it an art? Is it a science? Or is it both? I keep getting this question all the time. I wanted to have your views on that.
No, it's clearly art as well as science. It is a science because investing is a process, and art because of the manner with which it gets executed. It's like your diet. Diet is not only what you eat, but it's what you watch, what you listen to, what you read, and the people you hang around with. We need to be mindful of all the things that you put into yourself, emotionally, spiritually, physically. The same thing when it comes to money. If money needs planning, if not planned well, money can evaporate into thin air. And most of the time we wonder, how is it that people manage a high lifestyle, high expense? How do they drive big cars, enjoy foreign vacation, and do it again and again? They earn a lot of money, one knows, but it's also true that they do smart financial planning. How to invest, how to manage their money in the right way, disciplined approach of spending, intelligent investment decisions. All these are very important aspects of what we call art of money management. So, wealth management in its most useful form exists when there is a good intersection of financial planning and investment management. Art really is nothing but when it's more a customized reflection of the conversations you have with each client about their goals, about their achievements, what money means to them, what he wishes to do during it with his lifetime and beyond. And then it involves a little bit of creativity, customization, related to each individual's behavior, relationship, etc. with money. Science is more just the numbers, some past data, some, compounding. If a particular investment does X percentage return, how will it, look at the end of 5 years? But art is really the aspect that goes around planning, the right asset allocation, the right selection of products, the right portfolio that you need to create. And I also believe that art is also a bit to do with your experience, wisdom around what not to do in investing. Science will always give you past data and say this should be done. But art is also a little bit of intuition around going forward. Does it make sense or not? How does the future look? So there's a very, very good combination. So I would say in summary, a good combination of art and science really results in not only wealth creation, it also results in good wealth preservation and further transfer to the next generation. So it's a perfect combination. You should have both.
Interesting. That's very well put. In fact, reminds me of a statement I read sometime earlier, which said that you are what your 5 closest friends are. So, if your intention is to create wealth and maintain wealth over a period of time, you should ensure that one of your 5 closest friends is a good wealth advisor.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So, and that leads me on to my next question. How should one approach this whole process of wealth creation and management? There is a lot of talk people have, and there is a lot of things, but I'll urge you to actually simplify for the sake of our audience. How should one approach this entire process of wealth creation and management?
Okay, so wealth creation at the end of the day happens only if the surpluses you have post all your expenses and requirements grow in a positive manner post tax and inflation. Biggest risk in India always, and I think it's common, most people, most smart investors would know that the biggest risk to your money is inflation. Not only about where you invest, but it's also related to inflation. Every year, the value of your investments or your savings depreciate. So you have to find a way outside your business to invest your liquid surplus money in such a manner that post-tax, post-inflation, it gives you alpha. Along with that comes in what I mentioned, planning. It's always better to plan investments related to specific goals. So it becomes very important to define what are the goals that you want to achieve, because then your investment decisions also become much easier. So if you may have certain short-term goals, you may have certain long-term goals, you may have certain goals related to family, you may have something related to children, something related to buying an asset, or just enjoying a better lifestyle. If you have a disciplined way of putting all these thoughts down into what you want to achieve with your wealth, then the whole concept of wealth creation can be slightly more defined from a return perspective. You can create wealth by generating 30% return. You can create wealth by generating 10% or 12% return. But what is it that you want? What are your goals? Post which, the other very, very important aspect of wealth creation is actually not losing your wealth. If you preserve and get some basic return, that also is wealth creation. Many people tend to not invest in the right manner. They chase fancy investments. They get into speculative investments. They get into investments they don't understand, and there goes whatever little surplus wealth you've made. You can get stuck and you can actually deplete your wealth. So wealth creation is also a lot about how to manage risk related to where you're investing. You have to keep your investing simple. You have to keep your investment focused on goals. You have to keep your investments long-term in nature. And last but not the least, you have to have the right temperament. We say always there are three things that result in wealth creation: discipline, knowledge, and temperament. Discipline is really the planning part and not getting carried away, of over investing in something, or, like many times people have all their money only in real estate or only in their business or only in equities, and that when there are various cycles either in the business or in each asset class, you get stuck, right? So discipline is more about the right asset allocation, the right selection, and the second part, and also about not speculating, not leveraging, not using short-term money for long-term investments, etc., etc. The second part that I mentioned is knowledge. Knowledge is not investing in something that you don't understand. Having basic understanding of what you are doing and not getting carried away by fancy claims that are made, and that stare at you across, from various people in the industry, from media, etc. So you have to know what you're investing and not to invest in something that you don't understand. And third is temperament, which is how you treat and behave with each asset class and how you behave during good and bad times. We always know that wealth creation typically will happen with growth assets. Fixed income products just maintain your cash flow and manage inflation. But growth assets like your business, your equity, your real estate, all of these will generate positive returns post-tax, post-inflation. And all these investments need very good temperament, which is when you should be investing in equity, how long you should stay invested, what kind of investments you should go for. Temperament is where 90% of the people lose out. They will panic when markets correct. They will try and time the market. They will try and be very speculative about it, and they'll lose out. So in summary, wealth creation has many aspects. We know which are the good asset classes that can help you create wealth outside your business. But how you deal with it, how you treat it, if you treat it like an affair, it'll end like how an affair ends. But if you treat it like a marriage and you remain sort of, thinking of that investment from a long-term perspective and you be through it through ups and downs, you will find hopefully, much, much better power of compounding that plays over a long period of time.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah. Sachin, I believe you also have a couple of questions, right?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Rajesh, for being with us. Yeah, see, one of the other interesting points when we talk about wealth creation, wealth management, a lot of investors also, have this question that the estate planning, the legacy planning, how is wealth management, wealth creation interlinked with this? Are they similar, or is there some kind? They do have to be separated. How does exactly one approach this?
No, in some way they do go hand in hand, despite being different in nature. They're clearly two separate parts of an individual's journey. You first, of course, need to create a pool of savings post your expenses that needs to be invested. And it needs to be invested in a manner that actually creates wealth post-tax and inflation that I mentioned. And then you need to plan what to do with that money in your lifetime and post your passing away. Hence, I say they go hand in hand despite being different. One is about generating and creating wealth. The other is about protection or planning its usage appropriately. And time and again, we've seen that generation of wealth without proper legacy planning or estate planning actually leads to squandering away of wealth and actually the fragmentation of estate. So, I explained.
Sorry, could you just repeat that again? I think that's a very significant statement. Could you just repeat that again, please?
Yeah. So, we've seen time and again that generation of wealth without proper legacy or estate planning actually leads to squandering away of wealth and fragmentation of the client's estate. Because if it's not planned, what is that wealth? If you have achieved and created huge amount of wealth, what is it going to do over the next generations, and especially after you pass away? If you've not planned it well, and it's then left to the family members to do what they want to do with it, including your business. The same thing goes in business. Many times when we talk about legacy planning, people mistake it as only planning around their wealth. But their wealth is also their business, right? A large part of their wealth is business. I'm talking about now promoters. Now, how do you ensure that the business is passed on to the next generation? For larger businesses, there is always this challenge about ownership and management. Will my family members run the company, or will they just be shareholders? Do I need to get professional managers to run it? For some, it could be having two sons in the business. Who will do what? How will the business be run tomorrow to ensure that there are no challenges for the business if two people don't agree? Then some may have a situation where the son is going to run the business, but there's a daughter who's also a shareholder who needs to be given some money. So how do you manage? Now, if you don't do all this planning, all this wealth you created can then, lead to family disputes, issues, the business getting spoiled. And we've seen this. Most of the disputes that happen today, if you look at in the Indian environment, have been around property and business. Because most of the people earlier did not use proper tools of estate planning. And then that wealth and the liquidity gets, stuck. So it's very, very important. You need to know what to do with your wealth post you passing away, or even during your lifetime. Because even in your lifetime, there can be things that can happen to you. You may go through a personal accident, you're not available, you're not there to manage that wealth, to take decisions. So who's going to, handle the wealth? If your wife is not intelligent enough or does not have the acumen to know the business or the investment, then what's going to happen? So all these aspects are certain things that one needs to plan, or else, the wealth can really get squandered. Simple thing, even for individuals today, the social fabric in our country is changed, right? People have daughters, sons, they get married. Sometimes, the children are not able to get along. There's a divorce. Now, if all the assets are owned by your son and daughter, those assets can go into a litigation in case the divorce is acrimonious. So how do you protect those assets? Or I'm a business owner. I've taken a lot of loans, right? My business is doing well. I've given personal guarantees. Something happens to me, or the business goes through a tough time, and there goes all the wealth, because I've not separated family wealth and business wealth. So I think more and more people are realizing that they need to look at what to do with their wealth, how to pass it on to the next generation. Tomorrow, if there's estate duty, which is there, all of you are aware, estate duty exists in every country. Even in India, early 70s, there used to be what we call wealth tax. And it's a matter of time, even in India, estate duty is, comes back. Now, at that time, how do you ensure that you don't lose your wealth to taxes? And is there a better way to plan your estate? Hence, it's important that not only do you know how to create wealth and manage your wealth well, but when you have it, how should it be protected? How should it be passed on? All of this needs to be thought through in your lifetime. And, you need to put that executed either in a form of a will or a trust, or, there are many other solutions through which you can ensure that, this wealth carries on and there's a legacy that remains from a long-term perspective.
Right. So Rajesh, there is this one ambiguity or some kind of a question mark that a lot of people have, is that should we first have the entire wealth and then think about legacy planning, or should both go simultaneously? Wealth creation and legacy planning, can they both happen simultaneously?
No, it's a little bit about what is your personal setup in life. It differs. And for many, like some people have a special child, they have to do it immediately. They don't even have whatever little savings they have to plan for it, right? So everyone does have savings. The amount of wealth differs, from individual to individual, depending on what stage of life he is in, whether some of his core goals are already taken care of. Someone may have, he's taken care of children's goals related to education, marriage, has got his house, everything is taken care of. Now he's got surplus wealth, which he knows, even, after what he requires for retirement and healthcare, there's enough and more left for the next generation. So at that stage, he may start of thinking of a proper estate planning. But at least a creation of will is something everyone should do, irrespective of, whether they are starting the process or later on, because everyone will have some asset or the other. Everyone may have some business or the other. So creation of a will can be done as early as possible. And more complex estate planning or trust creation, etc., can be done in the journey.
Okay, sure.
Wonderful. I think these are very insightful conversations we are having. One of the things we wonder is how is estate planning traditionally done in India? What are your views on that, and how can it be made better? What has been the conventional way, the traditional way, and how can it be made better?
So I think historically families in India have relied on wills for their estate planning, irrespective of the size of the estate. I've seen even really large families with huge wealth typically have gone in with wills. But we've seen that wills, while they are basic tools for succession, they are quite susceptible to challenge. They've been, they get challenged in court. People will say, there are various reasons, and everyone's aware. I don't need to explain why wills get challenged very easily. Sometimes wills are not registered. And the other thing about wills is there has to be a probate. So everyone is aware of the assets. Everything has to get disclosed. So typically people have done it through wills because they found it simpler, easier. When you actually sit down and think about the other option, which is a trust, You have to engage a lawyer, engage a professional, share all your financial details, share your thoughts about how you want to, how you want to give the assets to the next generation. So there are a lot of sensitive conversations that have to take place in more, in structures like trust, etc., which sometimes people are not very comfortable with. Or the very fact that when you create a trust, you're actually moving the ownership of all your assets to a trust, to an independent trust. You may be the trustee or you may have a corporate trustee. And for many, psychologically, that's a big, a step, right? Because in a will, you don't have to put your assets under some other trust, right? So traditionally, people have done wills, but it's becoming more and more, clear now that wills are not necessarily the best tools. They are decent tools to have, but especially when your estate is larger, when you have more complex situations where you have wealth that will cross and last across generations, when you have a business or you have a large family where a lot of members are involved, whenever there's that complexity which is there, it's always better to try and see whether you can create a family trust or a LLP. Those are always much, much better options. But if you've got a very simple, straightforward life, and you are there, you are a professional, there's nothing much to do, you can just create a will and manage at least the basic methods of transferring assets to the next generation.
In fact, that's my cue before my next question. Sankalpo, maybe you would want to run a poll in terms of how many people actually have a will. The size of the audience has increased.
Because I did an interesting trivia thing. So Rajesh, you will be the the judge, or you will have to answer this question. So I asked, will your nominee necessarily inherit your asset? Okay, 80% of my audience today says yes. 20% says no. So you tell us how that actually works before we move on to the next question.
Very interesting.
So as the term suggests, nominee is nothing but a person who's nominated or appointed by an individual to look after financial account after his death, right? So you typically put it in your savings account or your policies or whatever. So it's a responsibility of the nominee to disperse the proceeds among the legal heirs. But now let me just give you an example. Let's say there's an individual, Mr. A. He's got a wife, he's got 2 children and he's got a mother. And in his bank account, he's nominated his wife to get, she is put as a nominee for that account. Now, suppose he passes away, right? If there is no will, right? While the wife as a nominee will have access to the accounts, but the other children, as per Hindu Succession Act, also have a right. So they can challenge her. So nominee does not mean she'll get the money. But if this client, Mr. A, had created a will and made his wife the complete 100% owner of that savings account, then no one can challenge.
Right.
That's the difference. So nominee does not mean that it's definitely there. If there is no will, firstly, the will will, supersede it. If the will has the financial interest can be created through the will. Nominee is just a fiduciary legal responsibility of ensuring that the proceeds reach to the beneficiaries, but they are not necessarily the only beneficiary.
Right. So good, I ran this poll. So I hope you guys, the audience today, got the answer. Thank you, Rajesh. We'll proceed ahead, Vikaas.
Right. This is very interesting information. In fact, maybe you've answered this question already, but I'd like you to go through it in a little bit more detail. What is the difference between estate planning and legacy planning?
Okay, so estate is nothing but your money, your business, your wealth, all of that is what really estate is, right? And you plan on how to give it to the next generation. That's what it is, right? So the word estate would include your business, your financial assets, your real estate, all of that put together. Legacy is a little bit more around, around like for many families, they also want to pass down value system of the family.
Okay, interesting.
What are the values with which the family will carry on their lives? What are the ways, for give you an example, if today there are two sons in the family, after I'm not there, or even during my lifetime, I believe that both the sons should, whenever they take a decision, even after they're married, let's say one son wants to buy a car, okay, and if he buys a Mercedes, I'll want the other son also to have a Mercedes. So I'll say, as a part of my legacy planning, the values that any decision on any car or any business will be limited to this amount and will have to be done within this amount. You're just trying to create like a value system that you believe is important, that you will not go overboard. Someone will not take some fancy holidays. Someone will do philanthropy. You create and put into legacy planning things that are important for you. It's more a holistic view of your estate. It's your financial wellness. It includes not just the management of your wealth, but it also includes non-financial assets, which are pivotal to your legacy. It could be core values that you live by. It could be responsibilities and expected behavior you would like to pass on to others. It could be certain other wishes, like what you would want the family to do in terms of community involvement. It could be philanthropy. It could be so many things which are outside just the material commercial estate that way. That's the core difference. Otherwise, pretty much, estate planning is typically people want to leave a legacy behind. They create a philanthropy trust. They will create a family governance chart. They will create what is called a family constitution on how things will run, who will do what are the behaviors we'll follow, what are the value systems for the family, what are the things we'll not do, how will we treat money. So a patriarch or the guy who's created wealth wants those value systems to live by and go by. And that becomes then a part of what is called legacy planning. It's a more holistic view of estate planning, nothing else.
Wonderful.
Yeah. So, Rajesh, if you can elaborate a little bit at what kind of goals that one need to consider when they are actually doing this legacy planning or wealth management. What kind of goals that one should actually keep? What should they consider? Some of those goals.
No, when you're doing wealth management, again, so let's start with wealth management. It's a function of your personal, what are you doing? Are you a professional? Are you a business owner? What are you? Your family structure. And then also, just a little bit of trying to understand, very tough to do it, but what is your risk appetite? And I think that's a function of how you've grown up and how you've, whether you are the first generation entrepreneur, whether you are second generation, whether you've born with a silver spoon, whether you had to work hard. Everyone has a different way of dealing with money and thinking about money or value systems around money. So when you create a wealth management plan, you have to take all these angles. Goals, I think, are very much clear for every individual. The goal could be around children. It could be around their education, marriage. It could be around retirement. Many people think that, don't think too much, about what will be the inflated cost of medical and good healthcare system later on in life. And, we've seen, at least in the last 30, 40 years, today, many who have gone old, they didn't save in the right way, or they didn't manage their wealth. They were putting it into simple instruments like, insurance policies, or just keeping it in FDs. And inflation itself has destroyed that wealth because it's eaten away, the value of that money. And today they struggle to get, great medical assistance, right? So you need to sit down and think about what are your life goals? What are the things in your lifespan that you want to achieve? And other than the usual, like I said, children, retirement, buying an asset, buying a bigger house, investing in a business, going abroad, holiday, whatever be it, you need to define what that amount would mean over the next 10, 15 years, how much would you require for it? If inflation is 6%, 8%, 10%, if your tax bracket is 30%, how much money would you require to meet all these goals in what specific periods of time? And I think a good financial planner and a wealth manager can help you do that, which is to really define your goals, define the amount required, look at your current expenses, look at your cash flows, and then say to manage your wealth in the right manner so that you can meet your goal or you can improve your lifestyle. This is how much you need to invest. And that investment, then how do you split it between each asset class? So a full-fledged investment plan can be made, or a wealth management plan, after quantifying and putting some number around your goal. And when it comes to legacy planning and estate planning, there are very good professional firms, there are legal firms, there are trust firms, there are corporate trustees with whom you can sit down and get a basic idea. You can share with them what your thoughts are, and they can help you then come out with a very nice plan. And they'll of course share different case studies, situations. They can share, or through an interview process, really understand some of the thoughts you have about what you want to do with your money in the future. How much would you want to give? How do you want to distribute between your children? How do you want to, what are the other goals that you want to achieve after you've gone away? So it's a full interview debate process, post which a good trust company or a legal company can come out with a very, very solid legacy plan for you.
Right. So, another thing is that, you have a very vast experience on this legacy planning and estate planning for, I'm sure, a lot of your clients. What are some of the key common challenges that you come across when they are actually trying to plan this? I'm sure there are a lot of challenges also when they want to actually put this into play,
No, I guess these are, more, I would say there are a lot of sensitivities around the discussion. Firstly, like I mentioned to you, transferring my assets in the name of a trust. So basically letting go control. Am I comfortable, not comfortable? Am I comfortable getting a corporate trustee? Who do I trust? Who do I make a trustee? If I'm not there, will my wife be a trustee? Will a close friend be a trustee? So these are not, in a will, you don't need to do any of this. You're basically saying, after I'm gone, immediately this is what happens. There is no, compared to a trust, like the big difference between a will and a trust, the moment you pass away, your will comes into force and whatever is decided happens, right? Unlike in a trust, where you can sit in a trust and plan, okay, when my child reaches X amount of age, he should get Y money. If my son wants to get out of business and do something else, one son, then X money should be available for him. Or if my children continue, to run the business in XYZ manner, they can take, X amount of money. So you can do a lot of future planning through a trust, which you can't do. Now, the big challenge for many is to actually sit down and plan that. Haven't we heard this? Even finance professionals, many of them will tell you, we are busy managing others' wealth, but when it comes to our own portfolio, we don't have time.
Absolutely.
We don't sit down and think about it. Same thing happens when you talk about a trust and a will. You keep pushing it to the future. You don't want to sit down, and you don't know how your situation will keep changing from time to time. So you tend to, say that, okay, I'll do it at some time. Then comes the trust part. How do you trust? Whom to trust? When to make it? Then sometimes it's about the charges. If I start making a trust now, a trust will start charging me annual fees. Why should I be paying that fees? So, because all these are new concepts, and frankly, because there's no estate duty in India, we've not been pushed into it. But I see I've seen at least over the last 5-6 years a lot of I would say understanding or conversations or dialogues with clients around creation of a family trust, looking at wills, and slowly but steadily people are seeing what the value the value that a trust brings in. And I think if estate duty comes in, you will see many more trusts getting created. many more that will come.
Interesting. Rajesh, while I was hearing you, I got this feeling that we're talking more about legacy planning, trust planning, wealth generation from people who already have wealth traditionally. So I want to be very specific when I ask you a question. We are a relatively young country, and there are a lot of people who are running into, a lot of first generation entrepreneurs and people who are running into serious amounts of wealth. And they may or may not actually have, I'm not saying experience, of course they won't have experience, but the temperament, the mindset, to engage in such things. So what are the basics such people, such first generation people who are running into wealth, they should have in mind about wealth management, about succession planning? If you could enumerate a few points which can serve as a primer for such people.
No, whether it is first generation entrepreneur or second generation, the difference is the way they go about creating the wealth plan. Because it's really, for many, let's say in technology today, there are so many entrepreneurs who are monetizing their, businesses and getting serious amount of liquidity. And they come from maybe families where, they were brought up with middle class values, and they came in from relatively middle class backgrounds. Now suddenly they've got 100, 200 crores, 50 crores of liquidity. They also have to invest that money. Okay. They have to find a way, to create maybe a safety pot. Some of them have suddenly come into a large amount of money, so they want to first create a safety pot and ensure that no matter what happens in future, their basic needs are taken care of. A nice big house, everything for their children, lifestyle maintenance, etc. Post which, they then start looking at how to manage the wealth. And there, I think it's a job of a wealth manager to really get to understand each client and see where he's coming from and create the right portfolio, which is a good mix of all the asset classes. But there is no cookie cutter kind of approach for first generation entrepreneurs when it comes to managing wealth. The fundamental point about managing wealth is how do you preserve it and grow it post-tax, post-inflation. As simple as that, so that all your goals can be met. That was the ultimate objective. And when I talk about it from a wealth management perspective, I'm only talking about surpluses outside the business or his income or profession. So these are the savings. These are the additional, money that he has. Now that needs to be put into investment. So the answer on wealth creation remains the same. What are the different asset classes that he can invest in? Equity, real estate, fixed income, the combination of which will be a function of what each individual's goal is, risk appetite is, return expectation is. And that sort of remains. So what I'm basically trying to say is it doesn't make a difference whether he's come into money now, first generation entrepreneur, or someone who has old money. Each person's wealth management plan will be a function of his goals, his risk appetite, and his investment horizon. And as a wealth manager, we have to understand each client and then try and customize a plan that makes people sleep well and helps them meet their goal. That's it.
I think that one line which you talked about makes people sleep well. I think peace of mind is ultimately what everybody wants to have at the end of the day. You're taking enough of risks in your line of business. The last thing you want to do is worry about what is happening to your wealth. Well, in fact, that probably brings me to my last question, and then I'll pass it on to Sachin if he has any question. We've talked about a lot of information which you have talked about in terms of all aspects. But when you're doing legacy planning, typically I've seen that people have a lot of perceptions, it's a lot of myths which they carry. I've always believed perception is reality in the absence of information. So here is a time, when I would like to ask you, what are the typical myths people have? You've interacted with probably so many people. And what should they be wary about? What you should not be paying heed to?
No, you're saying myths related to estate planning?
Estate planning. Legacy planning and estate planning.
No, one, of course, everyone thinks only the wealthy need an estate plan or to create a will, or the elderly need it, or people who are ill need it, which is not true. like I mentioned, basic will everyone should have, irrespective of, whether you're wealthy or not, because you have some asset. If you, and I'm assuming the audience whom we engage with are people who have some asset or the other, business, property, whatever else. So will is important. The other myth is, more around will is okay. Do I need a trust? Which I also explained that depending on each individual's situation, that conversation can be had, and one can decide whether you actually need a trust or is a will good enough. Okay. Then many people think, do I need to equally distribute? Why do I need a will? Is there a need to equally distribute? Or, if my family is all good, everyone gets along well, all hunky dory. So do I need to create a will? Things, my children are very nice. They no fights, nothing happens. So in future also nothing will happen. Why is it required? So these are all myths, and the biggest myth about a trust being that I'm giving my assets away in someone else's name. Everyone talks about Lodha case, in Calcutta. This can happen. The trustee can do something else, and what will happen. So all these are myths, and I think slowly but steadily, most people who are engaged with wealth managers, wealth advisors, and are well read are seeing now that both wills and trusts are very, very important aspects that one should have along with just managing their wealth.
Interesting. Sachin?
Yeah, so I'm going to change some tracks now.
Sure.
Rajesh, you did mention about the wealth management, wealth creation, legacy management, all of it, and very, very useful inputs, I would say, because these are topics which are not so well discussed, and most of our investors do not have a very clear understanding of this. But I'm sure listening to you today has given us a very good idea. But before that, one has to invest money to create that wealth. And I'm sure, you being the head of the wealth management at ASK, very important thing is that you do recommend a lot of mutual funds, a lot of PMSs to your investors. So something that is important to me personally, and also I'm sure to a lot of investors, they would like to know that how do you select on which funds to invest in? Do you go by the fund manager's philosophy? Do you go by the house? Do you go by the track record? What are some of the key parameters that you always look at when you are recommending a particular mutual fund or a particular PFA or a particular fund manager? How do you go about that?
So, great question. I think every wealth management house has a philosophy around it. There again, I would say it's a combination of art and science. Science is nothing but giving you data and numbers around, the past performance. You can get into all the technicalities, Sharpe ratio, beta ratio, this ratio, that ratio. So there is enough and more science and data available behind each of the investment products that are available, right? So of course, one studies that and one does go through it. It's not that you don't pay heed to cost, you don't pay heed to performance, etc. But I think 2 or 3 things that become very, very important, for us is one, of course, is the institution, no doubt. We strongly believe that, just star fund managers are not the only people. I would say there are good star fund managers also, but if they have a backing of a good institution, there's a little bit of more risk management that comes into place. So I strongly believe that if there is a good house with a good reputation of having launched sensible products, having strong risk management practices in place, it makes a big, big difference, or I would say it supports the way a fund manager even delivers returns. So we do look at what are the risk management followed in the institution by checking on how is the decision taken. Is there an investment committee? Who are there in the investment committee when a decision is taken on a product or on a stock or on any other investment or a bond, whichever, be it fixed income, equity, or whatever else? we want to understand what's the process behind selection. Who are the people who get involved? Okay, what are the checks and balances? What will you do if a stock is falling in a rising market? How do you, look at it? Or if you have 20 stocks in your portfolio and there are 5% weightage in each portfolio, each of the stock, if one of the stocks weightage goes beyond 10% because it goes through the roof, what do you do? So a lot of time is spent trying to understand the risk management practices. Because for us, when we are managing clients' money, my first objective is not return. My first objective is capital preservation. So in our firm, we believe that we are more risk managers and not return managers. Returns will come in if you do the right selection and you have your process and risk in place. Returns will come in. You don't have to do anything complicated in India. There is enough and more good quality investment products available. But if you be cowboyish in trying to take risk just to generate extra return, your reputation goes for a toss, and your client relationship suffer. So when we evaluate investment products, we look at risk management. Then we of course look at the fund manager and his thinking. There's a lot of discussion with the fund manager on how he picks an investment. Now, from the institution, we move to the fund manager. His background, his track record, his performance during good and bad times. We want to see how they've done even in bad times, not in good times. So anytime a fund manager says I've delivered 19% CAGR, I'll want to ask him, how is that done versus the index, and show us in the years when the markets were really bad, how did you do better than the index? So,
Right.
And then, stock selection. If he's saying I follow ABC methods, I look at return on capital and I will not touch a stock if the return on capital is less than 20%. Or he says, I will not invest in a business where the quality of management is not good. And then I see in a portfolio a bunch of bonds or a bunch of a stock where, we know that the quality of management is a challenge. Then that the fund manager is not keeping to his word. So all these things we've learned over a period of time, which is where the art comes in. More future looking, more thinking of what this guy is likely to do in the future. And does he have his investment philosophy right? Does it match our philosophy and our client's philosophy? Right. And then only we sort of, select.
Right. Perfect. That's very helpful. Thank you, Rajesh. Thank you so much.
Right. Wonderful. In fact, I was just looking at all the questions coming in. I think you spot on quite a few questions, Rajesh. But before we move on to the question answers, I would like to just repeat a statement which you talked about in terms of it being an art and science both. And the more I hear you, the more I'm starting to believe it's more of an art. And if it is an art, you have to let the financial advisor, the wealth advisor, be the artist who paints the canvas, of your future, of your legacy, of your estate planning. And now I understand, having listened to you for a very brief period of time, why you are one of the pioneers where clients will pay to listen to you as a fee, to your firm rather as fee. I think this has been very, very insightful. Thank you so much. I think we'll move to the question answers, Sankalpo. How would you like to take that? You've got a few questions. I can see a few questions here. How would you like to take it?
Sure. So, Vikaas, in the meanwhile, you select a few questions. I have just one personal question to ask to Mr. Saluja, which I think is going to be in the interest of the audience as well. So we have heard from you that asset management or wealth management per se is a mixture of both art and science. But maybe to my naive mind, when I listen to you, the process of legacy planning or estate management, okay, I somewhere come to, have reached the view that this bit of financial planning is a bit more towards the hard, is more towards like the hard sciences than art. So what are your views on that? I mean, I don't think anybody focused on this bit, but, if you could just tell me about this,
No, the estate and legacy planning is more art than anything else.
Oh.
There's very little science. It's all individual, customized, personalized, and a little bit on how to plan it more effectively. You're making it very customized. Whenever it's a little customized, very tough to put science around it.
Right. So thank you for that. Vikaas, we will come to you.
Yeah, I mean, before I move to the question answers, this whole art and science, I'm actually quite intrigued. And just yesterday, Sachin and I were discussing. Sachin has created this model called Equal in terms of evaluating quality managements. And often it's been said, that you identify quality managements, 90% of your work is done. But is it a perception? Is it art, or is it science? And I think while I keep believing that the more you interact with managements, you get a better feel. Comfort is more important than conviction. I think Sachin has developed a model called Equal, which has turned this into a science, into a number, a score. But more about that later. I think that is for another day. But it's very interesting. The thing about art and science in different proportions prevails across all aspects of financial services.
Right.
So I'm going to just quickly jump into some questions. Some very, very interesting questions have come in. Some of them I think you've already answered. Like Mukesh has asked, what is legacy planning, which you've already answered. But some of them, I'm very keen that you answer these questions, and you can be as brief as you wish to, because there are quite a few questions. Puneet Agarwal asks, why should one have a trust for legacy planning and not go via the HUF route?
Okay. No, so like I mentioned, a trust, you can always create or put situations in it. If this were to happen, this should happen. So it's a little more futuristic, and it becomes a much, much simpler way to ensure that all your longer term goals can remain and be executed through another trustee, which in HUF you are the main guy, the patriarch, and it all remains within you. A trust is more about after you passing away, how should the money be handled, or what are some of the goals that can be achieved. I think that can be much better planned through a trust.
In fact, he goes on to ask, when is opening a trust for legacy planning a better option, considering costs and hassles associated with creating and managing a trust? I think the underlying question is, or rather the observation is, that it is quite costly and quite hassling to associate one's creating a trust and managing a trust. Your views on that?
So that's correct. I mean, it's not expensive is a function of what is the wealth you have. So I can't answer until I know. So, there's no particular amount to say only if you have X amount of wealth, then it makes sense. But a typical trust, to create a trust, a decent trust, a non-complicated trust costs about 2 to 3 lakh of rupees. And then there is an annual management fee. If there are too many transactions on it, because you have to have a PAN number for it, it's a separate entity, and there is an administration cost, which can be anywhere between 0.05% up to 0.25%, or a flat fee. So it's a function of what wealth you have and what are some of the complications based on which you are creating a trust, and whether those complications will turn out to be more expensive than the cost of managing the trust is what needs to be thought through. If your life is simple, you may not even require a trust. So it's on each individual basis. I can't really comment to say whether it makes sense financially or not.
No, in fact, I'd like to underscore what you're saying. A lot of people at times do not differentiate between cost and value. Cost is what you think it is now. Value is what you realize it may be later. So
Right.
I think that's something which you've articulated very well. Now, I've got a couple of questions from Viren Patel and Deepak Shinoy, primarily on the importance of asset allocation in financial planning and wealth creation. So if you could just elaborate on that.
No, so it's absolutely important. There is no doubt, that asset allocation is more important than timing the market. It ensures that you are not putting all your eggs in one basket. Asset allocation does not stop only at each asset class to say, okay, I've got 100 rupees of wealth, 40 should be in equity, 20 should be in fixed income, and maybe 40 should be in real estate. It's not only that, it's also within each asset class. So within equity, how much in large cap, how much in mid cap, mutual fund, how much in PMS, how much in direct equity. In fixed income, it could be bonds, it could be high yield debt. So there are sub asset classes, and you have to know, and typically a wealth manager will be able to guide you on what is the right mix to have so that you can meet your stated objective of returns with the lowest possible risk. And so asset allocation. Along with that, many people have this question on timing the market. When should we exit? When should we enter? People make comments saying that you always tell us to invest, but you never tell us when to exit. Okay. Now, none of us, including us who've been 20, 30 years in the market, know how to time the market. The best of fund managers don't know how to time the market, right? Because the markets work on fundamentals, they work on sentiments, and they work on sometimes liquidity, right? You can control fundamentals, you can't control sentiment and liquidity. So to that aspect, you can't time. But through asset allocation, if you've got out of your 100 rupees, 50 in equity, 50 in debt, and the equity allocation moves up because the market has moved up beyond a range that is decided with your wealth manager. Suppose you say 10% is the range. Then you may remove money from one asset class and put it to the other. So if equity portfolio goes up more than 60%, you may trim it and bring it back. That's the only time you will sell or readjust or rebalance. Otherwise, you don't look at timing the market. So asset allocation has many benefits: diversification, managing your risk, taking a rebalancing of portfolio. All of these remain important ways of meeting your long-term objectives.
Brilliant. Sankalpo, I think one of your poll questions has inspired this question. What should be the ideal age to make a will?
So being, just from a practical point of view, it should be when the moment you have some, assets, good amount of assets in your name, and you maybe start a family. I would say anyone above 35, 36, ideally, from a more practical perspective.
Most people I've found talking about wills is once they cross 40.
Yeah, whatever, 35, so, 40, whichever 35, way
you're right. Absolutely. Right. So I'm going to use my power of discretion to just zoom into the questions I want to ask. There is one very interesting question I just got. It's on the advisor. In fact, two questions on the same thing. So Anchal Anmal asks, how can advisors help clients to understand their goals since most clients haven't thought about them or aren't sure of them? That is part one. Part two is, I'm just missing out who asked that question, about the emotions of the advisor himself while he's advising the client. How can we ensure that the advisor himself has kept his emotions under control? Very interesting questions.
Okay. No, the first one, of course, there are interviewing skills, which an advisor is trained on. What are the right questions to ask? It's not rocket science. You have to, firstly, even to ask those questions or get the right answers may take some time. It's not that the first meeting you have with the client, he'll start sharing this information. But if you're coming from a credible institution, you have a full-fledged agenda, discuss with him saying that I'm coming to meet you because I need to understand some of your key financial goals so that I can help you create the right plan. I think most clients will be willing to share information about their goals. If they're not, then you need to probably work on building more trust with the client. And maybe it'll take some time. It's really about how quickly, how soon, either through your institution that you are coming from or individual that you are able to build trust with the client before you start sharing information. And emotions, is something which you have to be extremely careful about. And this is where many advisors can land up making mistakes, because while the institution is recommending a particular way, to manage client portfolios or giving a specific asset allocation call, sometimes advisors tend to, put their own feelings and thoughts to the client, which is where you have to be very careful. And I see many advisors get their own, thoughts more from watching media channels or talking to 10 fund managers. It's not their own thought. It's been created because of all the information that is coming to you. And then you start taking a call and you start projecting to the client that you can time the market. It's a good time to invest, not to invest. अभी थोड़ा correction होने वाला है, wait करो, बाद में डालना. अभी US में ये हो रहा है, वो, so when you start letting your thoughts come through to an individual and you start looking at very short-term kind of, timing, it can really have a adverse impact. I mean, it works for you once or twice, you may build relationship with the client, but mostly it doesn't work. So you have to you have to remain disengaged while you have to be fully involved in the market and you have to have all the information to talk to the client. But when it comes to decision making, keep it as focused on long term, as focused on goals, as focused on power of compounding, long term returns, rather than too many short term kind of interactions. That's what you have to really manage and nothing more.
Fabulous. There are two small questions which I'm going to end with. There are so many questions coming in. I'm just going to take two here. Mr. Emkay Gupta, where is that question? Yeah, he is an NRI and he says, does it make sense to consolidate wealth in a trust if all members are NRIs? Is it allowed in a private trust? That is Mr. Emkay Gupta's question. And the following question is also in a trust, which I will ask you once this is done.
No, so I think it's a function of which country you're based in, how your tax is treated. I won't be able to answer it correctly at the moment whether you can consolidate your assets. One will have to understand where your assets lie. For many NRIs, they have their legs across 2 or 3 countries. They may have children working somewhere else. So you have to really get to understand your current situation before I can answer that. The second question you mentioned was related to it, whether I'm sorry, I missed the second part of the question.
This is the second part of the question. He's asking if all members are NRIs, are they allowed to in a private trust?
I'm not in a position to answer till I know which country, where they are based, where their income is.
So, Mr. Gupta, I think it will make sense for you to just write into PMS AIF World. We'll forward the question to Mr. Saluja, and maybe he can answer that. The last question, absolutely the last question. Gosh, the question is still coming in. Is there a regulatory authority for private trusts in this country?
No. Okay. It's a private trust. Therefore, you don't even need to disclose what's there.
Yeah.
To all the family members. It's absolutely private. You can create it with a legal firm.
Wonderful. I think this has been, and I've got some lovely suggestions also coming through. I'll just collate and circulate amongst all of us. But I think the question which I saw a lot of enthusiasm or a lot of this thing coming in is the one in which they talked about the advisor and his emotions while investing. I think that is a question from Anchal Almal. And if it's okay with you, I think this is the question which should be given the prize, because I really like that question and I think you enjoyed answering that as well.
Sure.
Fair thing? Yeah?
Perfect.
Anchal, thank you, Rajesh. Anchal, congratulations. You won a prize from FinLearn. And thank you so much for asking all of these questions, everybody. We've been overwhelmed by these.
Vikaas, I'll just interject. I just have one interesting question. Actually, two-parted question.
But no prize for you. No prize for you.
नहीं, sir. आप लोग आए हैं, वही मेरा prize है. So I hope my audience also enjoys this question. So a part of the question, Mr. Saluja, is how do you review estate/legacy planning? Like you can review your portfolio from time to time. Is that a function of estate or legacy planning? A. B. So this is again a very observational question. So, in the last episode of Alpha Mavens, Mr. Karan Bhagat was also with us, and he mentioned we are risk managers first, then we are, wealth managers. And I kind of got the same, thought from you. So why is that, in a relatively young country, when you manage, hardcore money, the advisors tend to be a little bit more risk managers than wealth managers. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, sure. So on the first question, reviews of estate plans are actually a part of the process, but they're done more if situations change. So, first, of course, when you're creating an estate plan, there's a lot of discussion and homework that happens. It can take anywhere between 6 months to 2 years before people actually come out with their estate plan. But having said that, there could be changes in situations, there could be changes in circumstances. You may want to add something in the trust. You may want to take away someone. You may want to change the beneficiaries. That's the beauty of a trust, that it allows you to fiddle around with, in your lifetime. And you need to review it as and when things are, if there is any need for change. When it comes to risk, I think this risk being our core philosophy is not only in India, it's a worldwide phenomena for most private banks. At least that's what they say, most wealth managers. Now it's a function of whether they live up to it or not. But today, a client who's given us money has given it, as it's a surplus. He's taking his risk in his business. Okay. Now, with the surplus that comes in, he doesn't want to take a similar kind of risk. Okay. So his core objective, giving that money to manage, is capital preservation and then growth. Even if the returns are lower, no client will ever, they may be upset temporarily, and that's a big thing in India. No one's happy with your returns. And even if they're happy, they won't tell you they're happy. Because if they tell you they're happy, then they feel that you'll get complacent. तो अगर 15% मिल रहा है तो 18 क्यों नहीं मिला? Because किसी और को 18 मिला है, या आपके प्रोडक्ट में 18 है but किसी और के प्रोडक्ट में, so that's fine. That's the way all of us are. We believe that we want the best, and if there is someone giving the best, sometimes we forget the risk. We only look at return. And a big challenge for all wealth managers, therefore, is to tell clients about the risks associated with each kind of return. And if he says that, listen, I'm willing to take that risk, even if my capital is lost, I'm willing to take it, that's a separate story. But broadly, he's giving you money, and the core of his wealth, I would say 80-90%, he wants preservation plus growth. He's willing to take the risk, but not at the risk of permanent capital erosion. And even in the conversation with clients, many advisors tend to keep quiet about the fact that notionally your portfolios can be down. And that is where they make a mistake. They talk more about how much returns can they generate to a client. Sir, this can generate 18%, 20%, 30%. They don't talk about the fact that to generate that 18%, there may be 2 or 3 years where your portfolio may be down 30%. Is that okay with you? Right? So when we are managing our own money, we may be, when any client who's created wealth is investing something on his own, he is taking the risk, and it's up to him what happens. But when he is giving a professional, reputed wealth manager and paying me a fee, he is expecting me to first ensure that the capital is preserved and then generate the positive return, not the other way around. And therefore, risk management is the only thing. If you manage risk, and when we say managing risk, it does not mean, for example, okay, because I don't want to take risk, I'll keep all the money in a FD. That's not what I'm saying. In each asset class, there is a risk. Equity, there is risk. Real estate, there is risk. Fixed income in India, in fact, fixed income has higher risk than equity. Contrary to what people believe, in India, fixed income products are where clients have got lost capital. In equity, if they remain in quality and have a long-term approach, you may find notionally the value coming down, but in the long term, they will never lose money. They only lose money if they exit at the wrong time, or they buy rubbish quality stocks, or they invest in rubbish products. But if they bought quality and they have long-term thinking, in India, you have to really work hard. So how do you control risk in equity? By focusing only on quality. And there you can define what quality is. What kind of size of company, what kind of track record of company, what kind of management, what kind of capital efficiency, what kind of earnings. There are lots and lots of filters, which today all of us have learned, given our experience over so many market cycles. In India, we've seen 5 or 6 market cycles where scams have been there, political crisis, Asian crisis, global crisis, and you're able to deliver positive returns. That means you are slowly but steadily learning from some of the challenges that existed and putting that in your risk management process and ensuring that the same return can be met with a lower risk. So that's our goal. First managed risk, return will come in. But very few people live up to it. People talk about it, but very, very tough to live up to.
Fantastic.
Sankalpo, good questions, but like I said, sorry, no prize. But this has been an amazing thing. I was just looking at the time we spent on this call. Remember yesterday when we were discussing, we were talking about 30 to 35 minutes, 45 minutes. It's been an hour and 16 minutes, and we've had a rapt audience listening to you. I think that reflects on the quality of the conversation. On behalf of Emkay Investment Managers and all my colleagues, Sachin, Shah, and my entire team, and on behalf of PMS AIF World, I'd like to personally thank you. This has been very engaging. This has been very, very delightful to hear you. If for lack of adjectives, I'll actually call it a masterclass. I'm sure that this is going to be viewed over and over again, once we launch it on YouTube. Thank you once again for sparing your time. This has been wonderful.
My pleasure and my privilege. Thank you for having me on this show. And I enjoyed this more than 1 hour kind of discussion.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you to our entire audience for having stayed put this entire time. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All the best.
Thank you,
All the
Sankalpo.
best.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Vikaas. Thank you.
Bye. Thanks. Bye.